I used to think that no place could ever be too warm for my liking, at least, not when compared to the constant drizzle and misty gray skies of my childhood in Seattle. But Los Angeles was a heat all its own, one that felt dense and oppressive, pressing in on me from all sides as soon as I stepped off the plane. The sunlight in LA seemed somehow more relentless than anywhere else, casting bright flares across windshields and turning concrete sidewalks into glowing white mirrors. Maybe it wasn't just the climate, maybe it was the city's pulse, that frenetic Hollywood energy that made everyone strive for bigger, flashier, and more expensive everything. I was neither glamorous nor wealthy, though. I was just Olivia, a graphic designer raised by two kindly but perpetually overworked teachers, and I had spent my college years fighting tooth and nail for scholarships and part-time jobs. Yet, through some cosmic twist, I ended up with Madison, my friend, or maybe something more, from those college days. She was the sun to my rainy day gloom, burning hot and bright, never seeming to run out of energy. Where I was cautious, she was fearless. Where I overthought each choice, she lunged headlong into life's chaos. And somehow, we had become friends. Perhaps friends was too simple a word for it, because as the years rolled on, it was obvious that I was enthralled by her, maybe even half in love with her, while she soared through life as though gravity were optional. I moved to Los Angeles for a job opportunity that landed me a contract with a mid-level advertising agency specializing in digital design. The idea was to soak up some industry experience, maybe even make a name for myself. Once there, I found a small rental near Culver City, threw my few possessions into a hatchback, and tried to pretend I was ready for the transition from the quiet, damp corners of Seattle to the brash, sprawling highways of LA. Within a week of my arrival, I got a text message. Vem pra minha festa. Não aceito não como resposta. The language was Portuguese, a little inside joke we had from our college days. Something about me having taken a single semester of Portuguese and always trying to impress her with random phrases. She never let me live it down. And in typical Madison style, her invitation wasn't really an invitation. It was an order. It read in English beneath that snippet. Come to my party. No is not an option. Madison had grown up in a world I only ever read about in tabloids. Her father was a big-shot producer with an endless list of Hollywood contacts. She spent her summers in places like Monaco or the French Riviera, rubbing elbows with minor royalty and wearing dresses that cost more than I made in 6 months. She was impossibly poised, the kind of person who could slip into a crowded nightclub and instantly draw a halo of admirers. In college, she'd strut around campus in designer clothes, somehow never looking ridiculous despite the otherwise laid-back Northwest vibe. I was the opposite. Messy ponytails, battered sneakers, jeans I wore one too many times before washing. Yet, for reasons I could never fully wrap my head around, we clicked. She found me refreshing, she'd said once. And maybe I found her exhilarating, like a kaleidoscope spinning through all the colors I'd never dared to put in my own life. I told myself I shouldn't accept her invitation. I'm not that person, the one who glides through a Beverly Hills mansion, chatting about how to cure a champagne hangover or which label's new line was absolutely to die for. But I couldn't shake the memory of the last time I'd seen her, how her eyes had lingered on mine, how her voice caught as she teased me for ignoring her texts. The truth was, I missed her, and I was curious, maybe even longing, to see if the city had changed her, or if she was exactly the same as she'd been when we were younger, wild, free, and bigger than life. So, I went. The air smelled of citrus and chlorine as I made my way up the winding driveway to Madison's party. Her mansion was perched on a hill in Beverly Hills, with an almost 360-degree view of Los Angeles. The city lights below shimmered like scattered diamonds in the night. Spotlights in the garden illuminated rows of perfectly trimmed hedges. People I'd never met strolled by, laughing into their phones or sipping from fluted glasses of champagne that probably cost more than my monthly utility bills. I tried not to gawk as I followed the hum of electronic music filtering from inside the house. Floor-to-ceiling windows exposed a sleek, modern interior, a place all glass and steel, with bold, abstract art pieces that looked both bizarre and unapologetically expensive. I stepped through wide-open double doors, feeling like an intruder in a house of illusions. Inside, the bass from the speakers vibrated under my feet. A DJ was set up near a living room the size of my entire apartment, blending tracks that layered pop vocals over house beats. Strangers clad in designer outfits brushed past me, their conversations mingling with the music. Told me the cameo alone was $500,000. My agent thinks I should buy a loft in West Hollywood. He's filming in Greece. Can you imagine the Instagram shots? I tried to suppress a wave of anxiety. This was a world that felt impossibly far from my own. A server glided by with a tray of drinks, and I quickly snagged a glass of wine, hoping it might calm my nerves. Then I spotted her across the room. Madison leaned against a glass railing overlooking the sunken living area. She wore a champagne-colored slip dress, its shimmery fabric catching the gleam of the interior lights, hugging her tall frame like it was custom-made. She was talking to someone, a man in a crisp white blazer, but as soon as I stepped inside, her gaze flicked to mine. Her lips curved into a slow, knowing smile, one that made me feel both important and a little bit cornered. She excused herself and navigated her way through the crowd, hips swaying to the beat. When she reached me, that teasing light in her eyes only intensified. "You actually came," she said, leaning in so I could hear her over the music. The faintest trace of coconut and floral perfume drifted toward me. I raised my glass. "You said not to say no," I replied, struggling to sound casual. "I guess I'm still not good at telling you no." She laughed, a husky sound that I felt in my chest. "You look good," she said, letting her gaze flick across my outfit, a short black dress that I'd hoped was dressy enough for the occasion. "You too, but that's hardly news," I teased, though my heart thudded as I spoke. Madison smirked, taking the time to slip her arm around my waist in a way that felt both protective and proprietary. My skin warmed beneath her touch. "Come on," she said. "I want to show you something." And just like that, she led me deeper into the house, through the crowd of well-heeled socialites and movie industry insiders, until we stepped out onto a spacious patio. The music faded behind us, replaced by the gentle splash of water from a massive infinity pool that stretched toward the edge of the property. Beyond the pool, LA's sprawl twinkled, a tapestry of glowing streetlights and skyscraper silhouettes. A circle of lounge chairs was arranged around the pool's perimeter, and a few guests drifted in and out, carrying drinks or removing their shoes to dip their feet in. But off to one side, there was a quieter corner where the lights were softer, the hum of conversation fainter. That's where Madison guided me, her hand still at my waist. "You always do that," I murmured, stepping closer so no one else could overhear. "Do what?" she asked, her eyes shining with a mischievous spark. "Pull me out of my comfort zone. Drag me along like you're absolutely sure I want to follow." She let out a breathy laugh. "Because you do follow." "I guess I do." Even as we spoke, I felt a swirl of old memories come rushing back. Late-night parties in college, 2 a.m., karaoke sessions, spontaneous drives to the coast just because she felt like seeing the ocean. Madison had always been the unstoppable force. I was the quiet observer drawn to her blazing trail. She motioned to the infinity pool with a tilt of her chin. "Do you swim?" I huffed a laugh. "Of course, I can swim. But I didn't bring a swimsuit if that's what you're getting at." "Who says you need one?" Madison's grin turned wicked, making my heart pound. She kicked off her shoes, letting them tumble onto the patio. Then, before I could object, she reached for the zipper at the side of her dress, pulling it down with an easy confidence that made my cheeks burn. The dress slid down her figure, revealing a skimpy black bikini I hadn't realized she'd been wearing underneath. My mouth went dry. "You planned this," I accused, though my tone wavered. Madison shrugged, unrepentant. "I always plan for fun." She stepped to the pool's edge, the water reflecting dancing lights across her skin. I saw the way her shoulders tensed slightly, as though even she was feeling the weight of the moment. Then she turned to me, extending her hand. "Come in, Olivia." I looked around, half expecting to see other guests either wading in or laughing at the spectacle. But it seemed like we were temporarily alone in our little corner, the rest of the party swirling inside. The night air was mild, and the pool itself looked enticing, steam rising in the cooler air. I trailed off, glancing down at my outfit. I wore a short black dress with thin straps, hardly appropriate for a dip in the pool. Then again, part of me was intrigued, a spark of thrill flaring in my belly. Madison's eyes locked on mine. "Trust me, you can." And that was how she always did it. She made it sound like a dare. So, swallowing my reservations, I let my fingers find the zipper on the side of my dress. My hands trembled slightly, but I forced myself not to overthink. The cloth slipped away, and there I was, standing in my simple black bra and matching underwear, wondering what in the world I was getting myself into. Madison's appreciative gaze roamed my body with a heat that made me shiver in anticipation. Then, taking her hand in mine, I stepped to the pool's edge. For a moment, we hovered there, the starlight above us, the city shimmering below. She let out a soft laugh and whispered, "On 3?" I nodded. 1, 2, 3. And with that, she pulled me forward. The water enveloped me in a rush of warmth. It felt shockingly pleasant, a welcome relief from the balmy air that clung to my skin. I emerged spluttering, pushing my hair out of my face as I looked around, blinking against the shimmering lights. Madison surfaced in front of me, water streaming from her dark lashes. For a moment, we simply stared at each other in breathless disbelief, as though we hadn't really expected to do this. Then she started laughing, a bright, almost childlike sound that made me laugh too. I felt the tension in my chest begin to ease, replaced by a giddy realization that I was actually swimming in an infinity pool on a random night in Beverly Hills, half-clothed, with the one person who had always made me feel both out of place and completely alive. She swam closer, water rippling in her wake, until we were just inches apart. I could see the city lights reflected in her eyes, could smell the faint aroma of chlorine mixed with her perfume. My heart thumped erratically. "You never relax," she said gently, reaching out to tuck a stray strand of my hair behind my ear. "Always so anxious, always so worried about doing the right thing." I forced a shaky grin. "And you're always chaos. Maybe that's why we get along." She didn't laugh, didn't smirk. Instead, her gaze softened in a way that made my stomach flip. "Maybe," she murmured, "it's something else." Before I could answer, her hand found my waist under the water, warm skin against mine. I sucked in a breath, suddenly aware of how closely we were pressed together. My nerve endings felt hyper-alive. "Madison, what are you—" I began, but the words died on my tongue as her mouth found mine, tentative yet seeking. My mind short-circuited. I'd thought about this before, about how it would feel if she ever closed that distance, if we ever crossed the line that we'd both pretended didn't exist. But the reality of it, the softness of her lips, the gentle pressure as she molded her body to mine, was so much more potent than any daydream. I let out a muffled gasp, my arms instinctively wrapping around her shoulders to keep from sinking under the surface. The kiss deepened, water swirling around us. In that moment, the entire world seemed to recede. No throbbing music, no prying eyes, just the heady rush of desire that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. When we finally broke apart to breathe, my pulse was hammering. Madison's pupils were dilated, and there was a flush on her cheeks that had nothing to do with the heat. She pressed her forehead to mine, our breath mingling. "I've waited a long time to do that," she confessed. A rush of emotion I couldn't name twisted in my chest, some mix of joy, longing, and a sharp edge of fear. I knew how complicated things could get with Madison. She was never simple. But in that moment, I couldn't deny how much I wanted her. I pulled her in for another kiss, and this time, there was no hesitation. The water lapped at our shoulders, and the stars above seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. I was consumed with sensation, the slide of her lips, the taste of her breath, the faint moan that escaped her throat. Eventually, we had to come up for air, and she cradled my face in her hands. "You have no idea how happy you make me," she whispered, her voice unsteady. I blinked back tears. I wasn't sure if it was the chlorine or the swell of emotions coursing through me. "Madison," "Shh," she said, pressing a thumb to my lips. "Don't overthink it. Just be here with me tonight." And in that moment, with the water buoying my weight and her hands gripping my waist, I let myself surrender to the warmth of her closeness, no longer fighting the tide of an emotion I had refused to name. We stayed in that pool longer than I would have believed, lazily treading water, occasionally stealing kisses under the glow of submerged pool lights. The rest of the party's noise seemed distant, like a muffled radio playing in another room. Eventually, our fingertips grew pruny, and we realized we should probably get out before we shriveled up completely. We slipped out of the pool, giggling like teenagers. The air felt colder now that we were soaked, goosebumps prickling across my skin. Madison found plush towels in a poolside cabinet, draping one around my shoulders, then wrapping another around her own waist. A few onlookers gawked as we made our way into the house, some with amused smirks, others with mild surprise. But no one dared question Madison. She was the kind of person who could get away with anything. We tiptoed up a spiral staircase to the second floor. Each step left little puddles of water behind us, but we were too buzzed on adrenaline to care. At the end of a corridor lined with modern art and track lighting, we stepped into her private suite. I caught a glimpse of a king-sized bed, a balcony overlooking the city, and pale curtains swaying in the breeze from an open window. Inside, Madison flicked on a low lamp, casting the room in a warm, dim glow. Then she turned to me, her eyes roaming over my drenched underwear, the towel clutched tightly around my chest. "You look amazing," she said softly, like she was admitting a secret. I felt a blush heat my cheeks. Her gaze, usually so playful, was filled with real tenderness. It made me want to both melt into her arms and bolt from the room. She must have noticed my hesitation, because she stepped forward and brushed a knuckle across my cheek. "Are you okay?" "I'm not sure," I whispered, meeting her gaze. "This is new." Her lips curved into a slight smile. "For me too." We stood there in silence for a moment, hearing the bass of the party still thumping from below. The faint hum of city traffic filtered through the open balcony door. A swirl of conflicting emotions churned in my chest. Desire, fear, excitement, uncertainty. Finally, she leaned in, tilting my chin up to kiss me once more. This kiss was different. Slower, gentler, carrying a question. "Is this what you really want?" I answered by pressing closer, winding my arms around her neck. My body shivered, but not from the cold. She reached for my hand, leading me to the bed. We collapsed onto the plush sheets, the air scented with her subtle coconut perfume and the faint chlorine lingering in my hair. I felt her heart pounding against me, matching my own frantic rhythm. We didn't rush. Instead, we explored each other's warmth, letting laughter and stolen kisses fill the spaces that words couldn't. Sometimes, life offers these moments of perfect clarity, when you know, deep in your bones, that you'll never be the same after. That's how it felt lying beside Madison, the moonlight grazing her features, her smile equal parts mischief and softness as she whispered my name. Eventually, we dozed off, tangled together in a heap of damp towels and half-dry hair. Just before I drifted into a dreamless sleep, I wondered if I'd wake up in the morning and find it was all some hazy fantasy. But then Madison stirred, pressing her lips to my shoulder in a half-conscious gesture, and I knew it was real. When I opened my eyes the next morning, the sun was streaming through the balcony doors, illuminating the crisp white sheets. I was alone in the bed, the spot beside me empty, but still warm. My head throbbed faintly, probably from the wine, lack of hydration, and the emotional whirlwind of the night before. I sat up, running a hand through my tangled hair. In the daylight, Madison's bedroom looked just as luxurious as I'd glimpsed the night before. There was a minimalist vibe, a few potted plants, a painting of some abstract cityscape, expensive-looking furniture, and a massive walk-in closet whose doors were slightly ajar. A soft knock on the doorframe made me jump. I turned to see Madison leaning against it, dressed in an oversized white shirt that probably cost more than my entire outfit combined. Her damp hair was twisted into a messy bun, and she wore an expression of cautious hope, as though she wasn't quite sure how I'd react to waking up in her bed. "Hey," she said, voice low and a bit scratchy from sleep. "Hey," I answered, suddenly feeling shy as I clutched the sheet to my chest. She strode across the room, setting 2 mugs of steaming coffee on the nightstand. "I figured you could use a caffeine boost." "Thank you." She perched on the edge of the bed, gazing at me. My heart fluttered under the weight of her scrutiny, and I found myself wishing for a bit more time to gather my thoughts. "Last night," she began, and I instantly tensed, bracing for regret or an apology, but she just shook her head, her eyes shining. "It was incredible," she said softly. "I don't want you to think I've changed my mind or anything like that." Relief flooded me. I managed a weak laugh. "Me neither, it's just, this is all big, you know?" She nodded, picking at a loose thread on the comforter. "I know. I'm sorry if it felt like I pushed you into it." "I'm a big girl," I said, trying for a playful tone but ending up sounding more vulnerable than I intended. "I made my own choices." She reached out, tangling her fingers with mine. "I'm glad you did." We sat in a comfortable hush for a moment, sipping coffee. The sunlight felt too bright, like it was exposing every crack in our carefully constructed walls. I wanted to ask her 1,000 questions. What would this mean for us? For our friendship? For the precarious worlds we lived in? But I was afraid of spoiling the lingering magic of the previous night with too much rationality. Finally, Madison gave my hand a squeeze. "Why don't we shower, get dressed, and see if we can salvage some breakfast? I'm sure the caterers left something in the kitchen." "Caterers?" I echoed, and she laughed, her old, confident self shining through. "Of course. You think I cook for all those people?" I rolled my eyes, feeling some of the tension slip away. This was the Madison I knew, the playful hostess who never lifted a finger if she could help it. All right, lead the way. She headed into the luxurious ensuite bathroom, beckoning me to follow. Warm water, gentle laughter, and the faint ache of an unanswered question followed me into the shower. Because even though I was enjoying every stolen second with her, a part of me knew that real life was lurking just beyond those sleek glass doors. Days turned into weeks, and a curious pattern settled between Madison and me. By day, we went about our respective lives. She took phone calls from producers and party planners, managing the threads of an incredibly social life that seemed so effortless to her. I juggled deadlines at my design agency, rushing from meeting to meeting, trying to prove myself to creative directors who barely remembered my name. But by night, we became something else. We texted until the early hours, sharing inside jokes and half-revealed secrets. Sometimes, she'd drop a casual invitation to dinner, but the moment I showed up, the atmosphere between us would shift, a charged undercurrent that made my pulse skip. When we found ourselves alone, we'd steal kisses, warm embraces, letting our hunger for each other overflow in whispered confessions. At first, it was like a glorious secret. She was my escape from the stress of LA's hustle, and I was her refuge from the swirling demands of her high society life. But soon, cracks appeared in the foundation of that arrangement. I noticed them in the way she'd sometimes stiffen when her phone buzzed mid-conversation, or how she'd glance over her shoulder at parties, scanning for paparazzi or someone who might catch a telling snapshot of us. One evening, we were at a small gathering in the Hollywood Hills, an intimate party for about 30 VIPs. I stuck close to Madison, not quite comfortable mingling with the crowd of up-and-coming actors and social media influencers who sipped cocktails like they were performing for an unseen camera. Around midnight, a friend of hers called from the other side of the room, waving excitedly. Madison squeezed my hand. "I'll be right back," she promised, and then she was gone, weaving through the sea of designer clothes and curated smiles. Alone, I wandered onto the terrace, which offered a breathtaking view of LA's cityscape. My phone buzzed with a work email, and I decided to check it, hoping to distract myself from the sense of displacement. But a few minutes later, my attention was drawn back inside to the sight of Madison laughing with a group of acquaintances. Her arm was around some guy's shoulder, a rising actor, if I recalled correctly, and they were leaning in close for a photo. A pang of jealousy twisted in my gut. But it wasn't just about the actor. It was about the fact that I was outside, unacknowledged, while she lit up the room with a smile that wasn't for me. My rational mind told me I had no right to feel that way, that we had never defined what we were, but my heart clenched. After a while, Madison returned, a slight flush on her cheeks. "Sorry, got dragged into a conversation," she said lightly. "Are you okay?" I forced a smile. "Fine, just needed some air." She studied my face, and for a second, I thought she might ask more. But then she nodded, slipping her hand into mine. The warmth of her touch reassured me, but the ache lingered beneath the surface. The more time we spent together, the more I sensed the fear lurking beneath Madison's bold exterior. She didn't say it outright, but I saw it in the way she'd tense whenever we stood too close at a public function, or how she'd hesitate to hold my hand once we were beyond the safety of her locked doors. She was used to living in the spotlight, but this part of her life, this piece that involved me, terrified her. I couldn't blame her entirely. She came from a family that thrived on image. Her father's brand was the picture-perfect Hollywood success story, and scandal was something they managed like a controlled brush fire, contain it before it spread. I doubted Madison had ever been allowed to openly explore a relationship with another woman, especially not one that could upend the tidy narratives her father's PR team spun for the press. But it hurt. One afternoon, we were lazing around her living room, a soft playlist drifting from hidden speakers. She scrolled through her phone, and I glanced up from a sketchbook I'd been doodling in. "Everything okay?" I asked. She'd been staring at her screen for a while, lips pressed into a tight line. "Yeah," she said too quickly, then hesitated. "There's a picture of you." She nodded, turning the screen so I could see. My heart skipped a beat. It was a photo of us at some party. I didn't even remember which one, standing off to the side, locked in a moment that was intimate without being explicit. My hand rested on her arm, and the look I gave her was unmistakably filled with longing. "Where did this come from?" I asked, my voice tight. She shrugged, forcibly casual. "Someone must have snapped it on their phone. You know how it is." "What if it ends up on gossip blogs?" I asked, fear rising. She raked a hand through her hair. I don't know, Liv. Maybe it won't, or maybe it will, and we'll deal with it. We fell into an uneasy silence. The truth was, there was no easy fix for this. Short of never appearing in public together, we couldn't control random phone cameras or prying eyes. And it was more than that. More than just a photograph. It was about who Madison was expected to be. A bright star on the Hollywood social scene, the perfect daughter for a powerful father. I reached out, covering her hand with mine. We'll figure it out, I said softly. She let out a shaky breath, tangling her fingers with mine. For a moment, I thought she might break down, tell me all the ways she was afraid of failing her family or tarnishing their image. But Madison being Madison, she slipped her mask back into place. Yeah, she repeated, forcing a grin. We always do, right? Yet, I couldn't ignore the knot in my chest that told me we were careening toward a crossroads. When the photo did leak, it wasn't even that scandalous by normal standards. We were just standing close, the angle of the shot making it look more charged than it maybe was. But social media lit up with speculation. Is that the daughter of so-and-so film producer? Who's the girl she's with? Tabloid websites ran short blurbs. Nothing huge, but enough to rattle Madison's family. Overnight, she became distant. Phone calls got shorter, texts less frequent. When I did see her, there was a subdued tension in her posture, a wary look in her eyes like she was waiting for the next bomb to drop. One day, I cornered her in the hallway of her own house. She was dressed for an event, wearing a stunning burgundy gown that reminded me of some old Hollywood starlet. But her expression was taut, preoccupied. Are you going to talk to me? I demanded. My voice came out sharper than I intended. She paused in front of a massive floor-length mirror, adjusting an earring. About what? About why you're shutting me out, I said, stepping closer so I could meet her gaze in the mirror. She exhaled, fingers pausing on the clasp. Liv, it's not about shutting you out. It's just, the timing is awful. My father's dealing with a big press junket, and he thinks it's best if I keep a low profile for a while. I folded my arms. A low profile, meaning away from me. Madison turned, her expression conflicted. I'm trying to protect you too. Don't you see? The tabloids will tear us apart if they smell real drama. My father will... She trailed off, frustration radiating from her. He'll make life complicated for both of us. Did you ever consider that maybe I want to fight for this? For you? My voice wobbled, betraying how much her distance hurt. She closed her eyes, a pained look crossing her features. I'm not good at this, she whispered. I wish I was stronger, but I'm not sure I can handle the fallout. I've never had to stand up to my father about something like this. And the press, God, the rumors would never end. I stepped forward, resting a hand on her arm. Madison, I'm scared too. But if we don't at least try... She cut me off, pulling away. I can't, she choked out. Not right now. Please, understand. And in that single moment, I felt my heart crack. Because I did understand. She was telling me, in her own words, that she couldn't choose me, not over the life she was expected to live. A few weeks later, I learned through mutual friends that Madison was taking a break from the LA scene, traveling with her father to Europe for a series of film festivals. The official story was that she wanted to expand her own cultural horizons. But I knew it was partly to ride out the gossip in a different time zone. She didn't ask me to wait, and I didn't ask her to stay. It was like we had both reached an unspoken agreement to let go. The phone calls stopped, replaced by occasional social media updates where I'd see her strolling through the streets of Venice or posing with her father at a London premiere. She looked radiant, of course, but there was a careful distance in her smile, like she was always aware of the cameras. I tried to bury myself in work, picking up extra shifts, pushing my creativity in design projects that demanded late nights. My colleagues joked that I was gunning for a promotion, and maybe I was. But it was more about filling the void Madison left behind. One night, though, I got a text from her. I'm back in LA. Can we meet? 1,000 emotions bombarded me. Hope, dread, longing, anger. After some hesitation, I agreed. She chose the location, a high-end rooftop bar in downtown LA. I arrived early, fidgeting with my phone, sipping a water I didn't really want. The sky was a swirl of pastel colors as the sun set, framing skyscrapers that loomed like silent witnesses. Then Madison walked in. She wore a simple black dress this time, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She spotted me instantly, offering a tight, uncertain smile. We found a private corner, seated at a small table overlooking the city lights. For a few minutes, we made polite small talk. How was Europe? How was work? How are you? But the tension between us was palpable. Finally, Madison sighed, placing a hand over mine on the table. I missed you, she admitted, her voice trembling ever so slightly. I swallowed hard. I missed you too. She glanced away, tears glossing her eyes. I never meant to hurt you, Liv. I couldn't handle the pressure. I was terrified of disappointing my family, of becoming a public spectacle. I squeezed her hand gently, a wave of empathy and heartbreak surging in my chest. I know, but it still hurt. It still hurts. She wiped at the corner of her eye, a soft sniffle escaping. I'm so sorry. We looked at each other, a long, searching gaze that flickered between love and pain. In the background, lounge music drifted over the rooftop, mingling with the hush of conversation. She parted her lips, like she might make a declaration, some last-ditch attempt to fix what was broken, but no words came out. I closed my eyes, exhaling a shaky breath. Madison, I do love you, but I can't stay caught in this limbo, constantly hiding, waiting for you to decide if you're strong enough to fight for us. I need more than stolen moments and half-kept promises. Her shoulders slumped, like all the fight drained out of her. I understand, she whispered, and I don't blame you. For a few precious seconds, we clung to each other's hands in silence. The city lights blurred in my vision as tears welled up, but I blinked them back. I had made my choice. It was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do, walking away from a connection that felt so raw and real. But I knew that if I stayed, I'd only sink further into heartbreak, overshadowed by a life that was never truly mine. I stood, picking up my purse. Madison rose too, eyes brimming. I leaned in and pressed a trembling kiss to her cheek, breathing in her familiar scent one last time. Neither of us said a word. We didn't have to. Everything that mattered had already been said, or left unsaid. Then I turned and walked away, tears trailing hot lines down my face. Part of me wanted to run back, to beg her to choose me, but a deeper part knew I needed to choose myself for once. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my art, channeling the swirl of heartbreak and longing into designs that took on a new depth and vulnerability. My boss noticed, praising my work as more emotionally compelling than ever before. I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a painful reminder. A few times, I caught glimpses of Madison on social media, photographs at events, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends. She looked poised, polished, exactly the way the Hollywood crowd expected her to be. The pang in my chest hadn't gone away, but it had dulled, replaced by a resolve I could claim as my own. I focused on building a life in LA that suited me, connecting with a handful of genuine friends, discovering cozy coffee shops hidden in the sprawl, going for morning runs by the beach. The city's relentless sunshine didn't feel quite so suffocating anymore. Maybe it was because I was learning to stand on my own, forging an identity not tied to someone else's star power. Sometimes, late at night, I still dreamed of that moment in the infinity pool, the way the water cradled us, how her lips felt against mine under the starlight. I'd wake with a bittersweet ache in my chest. But then I'd remember how I'd walked away from that life, from her, because I deserved more than half-truths and stolen kisses. And now, that heartbreak has woven itself into the tapestry of who I am. I can't claim I don't miss her, or that I'll ever fully forget her. But I can say that I'm stronger for it. Love can be a catalyst, even the loves we can't keep. They show us the shape of our desires, the boundaries of our fears, and the worth we didn't know we possessed until we stand up for it. I'm no longer the person who arrived in LA, wide-eyed and uneasy. I'm forging my own path, one day at a time, learning to trust the quiet voice in my heart that says I am enough, that my happiness shouldn't hinge on someone else's acceptance. It's a slow process, but each day I feel a bit more settled in my own skin, less afraid of letting people in, or, if needed, letting them go. In the end, I can look back on that night in the pool with a semblance of gratitude. It was beautiful, messy, full of promise and heartbreak. It changed me, set me on a course I wouldn't have chosen otherwise. Maybe in a different life, or a different timeline, Madison and I would have figured it out. But I'm at peace knowing that I made the right choice for myself, even if it still stings at the edges. Because sometimes, choosing yourself is the bravest love story of all. And you, have you ever had to leave someone behind, Even though you knew you loved them,